Grace Hill, good to be with you this Monday evening of Holy Week. Just really thankful to be able to spend some time with you guys tonight. And you might be wondering, why are we doing this? And I'm excited to share just briefly what we are doing and why we're coming to you via video. And as you know, we're already in the Holy Week and we've been going through this guidebook together. And so we had Palm Sunday yesterday and today is Monday. And so you've been reading from the guidebook from Luke 20. And so what we wanted to do is just kind of two special things this week, amongst other things that are going on, is really kind of focus in on this chapter. But what we wanted to do is, instead of just having it being a devotional time for us at home, wanted to invite two people to share part of their story as it relates to what we are reading about in Luke 20. And so the aim this whole week, as you already know, is we're just walking through the Gospel of Luke as Jesus is heading to the cross. He's merely hours away, and each day that we are reading from Luke's account, we're seeing something very specific about Jesus. And the main question we're trying to answer is, who is Jesus? And so tonight, and today, as you've already read, I hope you've had a chance to read through Luke 20. But tonight, what we're going to discover in Luke's account of Jesus is that Jesus is going to show that he is the Lord. And so that he has all authority, that he is in control. And so if you've read the text, just the quick summary of that is you find Jesus being confronted by the leaders of his time. And there's about 5 different confrontations and challenges to Jesus and his leadership. And in each one of them, he shows that he is the one who is in control, whether it's a political challenge, a theological challenge, or even just a personal challenge. And in each of these places, we see something very specific. And so we believe that Luke's trying to just really hammer home Jesus' teaching that he is the Lord. And so I'm really excited to introduce tonight our two very special guests, and it'll be Mark and Becky Lenart. Mark, Becky, so thankful that you chose to spend time this evening with me. I know I had to coerce you guys to do that, but
Thanks for having us.
Mark and Becky Lenart are just incredibly faithful brothers and sisters at our church here at Grace Hill. Guys, we are so grateful for you guys. And so we've just asked them to consider and spend some time themselves in Luke 20, just like we're doing. And so tonight, they're going to share some personal reflections from their own life to help us apply and answer this question, who is Jesus? But before we do that, Mark, Becky, would love you guys just to introduce yourself to some of the people who may not know you guys.
Okay. I grew up in Texas and in a Christian family, accepted Christ as a young child. And growing up, I went to Texas A&M and always wanted to not leave Texas. Wanted to stay in Texas. I wanted to live in the same house my whole life, get married, have some kids, and never leave. And enter Mark and the Navy into that equation. And
did you ruin her dream? Is that what I just heard?
Okay, let me continue. So I got married. We got married right after I graduated, and then proceeded to move 11 times and had a lot of deployments. And so obviously God had other plans for my life. But we have 4 kids. And the oldest just got married in January, so we have a new daughter-in-law. And I have been able to be home with them and homeschool. I was just thinking about it. So our oldest from kindergarten, so that puts me up at a lot of years. I don't know, a lot. So anyway, it's been good.
Awesome.
So I'm Mark, and the Navy's been my only job from college on. I initially did some time in the submarine force, and then went back to school and went to medical school. I'm an anesthesiologist with the Navy, and took Becky on a number of moves during that time. But we've been in Reston Herndon for almost 3 years now, and been at Grace Hill for most of that time, and it's been a ride.
Yeah. So with your deployments, have you been literally all over the world?
Well, my submarine was deployed out of Hawaii, so got to see a lot of the Pacific Ocean, and then did a deployment in Afghanistan, and then was involved with Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, so did some Atlantic. So haven't been to Europe and the Mediterranean too much, but a lot of the other parts of the world.
It's incredible. Guys, thanks for sharing just a little bit of your life with us. It's just a really unique opportunity for some of the folks at our church just to get a little bit of a taste of who you guys are. And just really, really thankful for you guys hanging out with me tonight and talking about this. So again, just really what we're going to do now, I just wanted to ask the Lenarts to spend some time with the text, as I mentioned earlier. And one of the things that was just really one of the reasons why I wanted to hear from them is some of what you've already heard. They've had some significant experiences. Mark specifically, even just with military. I think one of the things that like drew me as we were thinking about this was with authority and leadership and control. Like, man, the military is a very, I just thought this would be really neat to hear from you and your perspective. And then you as a wife to a military husband and a family, military family. And, but of course your life is not just that, but so we're just going to jump in. And so, hey, as we consider the text of Luke 20, and Jesus is obviously, as you know, he's being confronted over and over again, and just questions of his leadership. They're obviously trying to trap him. And to catch him and try to figure out how can we trick him into this and kind of discredit him. And every time he avoids the trap and he proves why he has all authority. He's the one in control. And so, so it's good for us. We need to know that. But I think one of the things I'm curious to know, Becky, is as you've read that, what has stuck out to you as we think of Jesus and the Lordship of Jesus? How does that impact your daily life? Like, what would you give us some of your thoughts on that?
I think overall, when I think about Jesus' authority in my life, I think that means that there are no small moments. There's no insignificant things that happen. And, I was just thinking about, different aspects of my life and how I like for grumbling. I was just reading in James, that we're not supposed to grumble. And I was just thinking about that and what an offense that is to God, because I'm saying I'm not happy, whether I'm grumbling in marriage, whether I'm grumbling as a parent, whether I'm grumbling because the stoplight right outside our neighborhood does not turn very fast, whatever it is. That matters, and even those little things with traffic, I think that matters in our reaction to that. Though I don't know if you you want
so Becky, when you no, that's really, really helpful. I think one of the things that it's so easy, I know for me, and I'm sure many of us, is like you mentioned traffic, and we can kind of make light of that. But I'm curious, and if you'd be willing to kind of press into that just a little bit more, if you would. I think the idea that traffic, like it's essentially, I feel like what you're saying is like it reveals something about our heart and relation to God, where it's like, wait, in those moments when we get impatient, or even as you just said, like with even the traffic example, like, how is that? Like, I mean, certainly it sounds like there's parts of convicting for you, but how is the Lordship of Jesus, that he's in control? Like, in your own heart, how is that, what's that doing in your own heart as you just consider it in that regard?
Yeah, I think because it matters how I respond. So, the traffic is one issue, whether it's a situation going on with the kids, I think a lot of times as moms, we say, I need a break. I need a break. And, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
But what are we doing in our break? Are we mindlessly, just because I want to be away? Are we trying to make ourselves better? Are we trying to, I don't know. I just think it's important for us to think about what is God trying to do in our lives in this situation? And I don't think we really have the right, because of God's authority in our life, to just say, you know what, I want to do this for me. I want to just chill out for a while, and not that we can't relax,
right?
But to say I have the right to that, or in marriage, if so Mark and I, our number one, we would both say, problem in marriage is communicating. And because our personalities and we think differently. And so you would think after 28 years, that would be better. But it still happens. And so sometimes that's frustrating. And I just think, you know what? I'm done. I don't even want to work on this anymore.
Sure.
Not that the marriage is over, not that there's not hope for good days in the future, but just for right now, like, I don't want to be part of this.
Sure.
I want to go away. I want to be by myself, and I don't want to have to interact.
Yeah.
And I think the authority of Jesus says, you can't do that. This is the husband that I gave you, his personality, your personality. And maybe I made Mark like that because you have this dark place in your heart and I need to, I just think there's so many instances in our lives that if we look, God is trying to work on our hearts.
Yeah.
And
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Becky, I think one of the things that's really challenging to me as you were just even talking through those places is it can seem small and somewhat insignificant or even kind of those me moments. But like even you're going back to the traffic one where it was just like, how can we entrust ourselves to God? And I think Jesus over and over again, of course, the Pharisees aren't looking to like trust him, but he's basically trying to say, listen, like I'm in control of all of these things. You trap me in all these things, and he's giving these reasons why he is in control. And I think even just where you're talking about the traffic part, where it was like, wait, like, man, my frustration here, I can go to the Lord. What is the practical way of trusting that God's in control, even in the frustrating moments, and like especially marriage, right? There's a big one in these moments, to like entrust ourselves to Jesus, who is in control. And I love what you're saying, just even working these things out and the friction to be actually redemptive moments as we get to continue to grow in our trust of Jesus. I think that's really helpful. I love just the very practical places, because I think sometimes we just can miss that the Lord is really cares about all of those moments that we have. Mark, how would you characterize some of the things as you've read through Luke 20 as it relates to just the authority of Jesus and how that's affected your life?
Well, I think about authority kind of in a military sense, and the fact that's, like, as I mentioned, that's been my perspective from my earliest working days. And, I've had, I'm sure just like everyone, but I've had folks in authority over me who've been really fantastic, and some that I really didn't care for. And God is not more or less in control based on who that person might be.
Right.
And my job remains, the military is sort of funny because there's always somebody who outranks you, and there's usually someone who you're, above. But my job is to make my boss look good, even the ones that I don't appreciate so much, or who I think are taking credit for work that I've done, or who don't see the world the same way I do.
Right.
That my investment of effort is the same no matter what my feelings are with regard to that.
Yeah.
And so, as a Christian, the same, the parallel application, I think, is our job is to make Jesus look good all the time, whether we're sitting at the traffic light or as we're interacting with others, that even when we're tired or hungry or had a bad day or go through the list, that we ultimately are reflecting, understand about grace, and we're not a works-based faith, but that ultimately we have his priorities in mind, and that we submit our actions and our attitudes to that.
Man, that's really good. Both of you, I think, have helped in a very practical way, and I hope for Grace Hill, those watching, that this is just really a helpful moment for you to consider in your own lives, because we're talking about everyday things of driving, of marriage, just interaction in a relationship, whether you're married or not. If you're a relationship, then you've had hard moments and times where you want to, and then even with you, I'm so thankful of that, because most of us work in a job somewhere, and whether it's military or not, there's this reality that, and I think Jesus is proving this over and over again, and we'll get to another question from the text, but one of the things that struck me as you all sharing was this, is like the idea that we're to be like ambassadors of God, like, to make him look good, to show who he really is. Like, it's interesting, because when we do those things, like when we show patience, and whether it's on the road, or where we show deference to the authorities that God has put over us in our marriages or in our workspaces, it's actually pointing to like the source of that ability to trust. And Jesus is that source. It's interesting that is just like, the world should see us and go like, where's that coming from? And it's this idea of like, man, everything is in Jesus's control. And so, man, I can submit to the boss who everyone else talks poorly about. And even I would not even disagree with the poor words, but I don't need to engage in that, because listen, I want to honor and make him look good. And I want to honor in my marriage the institution that is, and just even the spouse that God's given me. And that would then be an encouragement, and sometimes convicting for the other person in the relationship, going, wow, you're showing me grace in a place. What are you doing? Well, we're essentially entrusting ourselves to the authority of God in all of these different places. So I find that so helpful.
And Evan, I think that when I think about this thought of there's no small moments, that everything matters, my first thought was, oh, that's a lot. I can't do all that. And I think that's the point of Christ's authority. We can't do all that. It's a submission. It's a laying down of ourselves and allowing him to work through us in those little moments when we can't in ourselves.
So good. Becky, that in some ways, this leads perfectly into the next question. When we think about, so the context again in Luke 20 is going on, is a lot of the interactions he's having is, in some ways, they're all trying to find this loophole around Jesus's authority. They're trying to catch him in one way or another. And there's all these different, places they bring that up. But so kind of in that same vein, I'm actually curious, Becky, for you, as you think about that text and the authority of Jesus and Jesus as Lord, man, what comfort do you find? You kind of alluded to that a little bit a minute ago, but what comfort do you find in Jesus' Lordship?
Yeah, because he's in control, even when things look out of control. And I was thinking about Mark is planning a trip originally with our youngest son. And it was the first time that they're going to Alaska. And so the two of them are going to be on a plane. And I was very excited about it. I think it's going to be a great trip. But then I panicked. I thought, what if there's an accident? What if something happens?
Sure.
And I start to, and so, I'm working on my self-talk. But with Jesus being in authority, that means, that it's going to be okay. And it's not going to be okay because I can look at the statistics of airplane crashes and say, oh, it's really not going to happen.
Sure.
It's going to be okay because Jesus is going to be there. He's going to be with me. I was reading in Deuteronomy this morning, and Moses was talking to the people going into the land, so it doesn't exactly apply, but he was saying, don't be in dread of them because the Lord is in your midst. And so I think that's the comfort that we get from God's authority, that he's in control. And even things like, I don't know what tomorrow brings, because the funny thing now is the trip, all three boys are going on the trip.
So it ratcheted up, not just two. Now there's,
now it's all the boys.
Exponentially more. Okay.
All the Lundermen.
Yeah.
But, and obviously I don't want anything to happen,
of course.
But God knows, and he's going to bring people alongside me, and he's going to carry me in whatever, that he has planned.
Becky, I just appreciate your candidness in that and just transparency, because I think that is the very place that most of us, if we're just honest with ourselves, really wrestle like the what if part. Like, well, okay, it's easy to trust when everything is okay. When he's sitting right here next to you, or my wife's at home with my children as we're doing this, and it's like, yeah, trust the Lord. The authority of God is good, and yet Jesus, because even in the context, he's literally getting ready to sacrifice himself, which is why we're trying to answer this question: who is he? Why it's so important for us, because when it gets to those places where inevitably, whether it's today or tomorrow, we're going to be faced with an end of many different things, and not to be morbid or somber, but I think it's just sobering to go, wait, Jesus is actually making claims of authority to say, listen to what you're saying. Like, no matter what happens, insert our greatest fear, me, you, God forbid, God, please spare. But like, hey, Ukraine's going on right now. And like, is he still good in that as families are torn apart? And Becky, I love that you're hitting, I think, at the very heart of what Jesus is pressing to say, like, all things are in my control. And so to trust me is actually the most comforting thing, even though things might get very difficult and very brutal in some places. It's like, I just appreciate that's where to me, honestly, that's where the rubber meets the road where you're talking. So I find that really challenging and encouraging to go like, and I love what you said too, that we used other people, like, that it's not just a solo endeavor and this ability to have our faith pointed at the one who has all authority, right? We just need to encourage each other. So Becky, that's just super challenging. So I just appreciate that. Mark, I want to just you, as we talked about this earlier, you brought out something just really, really great from the text specifically. So I'm not going to steal your thunder because this was, from your heart. And so I just want to, why don't you share with us how you see in the text the authority of Jesus has just kind of this macro reality to the world at large, and just take it from there because you had a great insight.
Well, thanks, Evan. I've had lots of thoughts about the first part, but it seems like the whole chapter kind of pivots on that part, as you've suggested. And so the Pharisees are coming to say, trying to get him to have a binary answer. Are you from God, or is your authority from somewhere else? And then whichever answer he gives, they'll use it to undercut kind of his words. Right. But as you mentioned, Jesus is way smarter and wiser than all that, and he winds up not answering the question, or not answering their question by asking them a question that in fact they can't answer. But it's at some level, I think this question is being asked by our culture today, like the great says who, and the authority of Scripture seems like it's being questioned in ways that were unthinkable 10 years ago, but now it's common. Yeah. But the irony in this Luke 20 passage is that he's about to go to the cross and lose his life, give up his life, and then conquer death. And in the Narnia series, right, the stone table cracks, and all of the principles of the universe are going to get upended as he stands up and walks out of the tomb. Right. And that the reality of that is so awesome that you don't even, you read the Pharisees' questions and you kind of snicker. Right. Like, whose authority? Watch this. Yeah. Right. And it's not a poking someone in the chest or anything like that. Certainly he did it out of his love for a people who couldn't come to God any other way. But as our culture, asks that question about the authority of Scripture and about marriage and about our identity, that really the essence of that answer is the one who has authority over death, because no one in the history of the world outside of Jesus can make that claim. Right. And so what he's going to do in a couple chapters later is going to answer in spades kind of the question of the Pharisees in the first part of the chapter. Yeah. And that's very refreshing and peace giving, very satisfying that we can just rest in this Savior.
Right.
I mean, to Becky's point, we don't have to have fear,
right?
Because he has authority over life itself.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, and we were talking, Mark, about what where is it? Oh, the about the paying the taxes to Caesar.
Yeah.
And about
So further on, and they ask about whose impression is on the denarius, and they say Caesar's, and he again doesn't answer by saying, well, then give to Caesar what's Caesar's, but give to God what's God's. And the question, it seems, that doesn't get asked is, whose impression is on you?
It's really good.
And that idea of the image of God being on each person,
right?
The most athletic star athlete and the crippled, disabled, baby, elderly, whatever it is the same. And we can't, if we don't derive our dignity from that being made in God's image, then we can negotiate the value of life.
Yeah.
And the discussion that we were having was sort of tying the authority with that piece.
Yeah.
And the Imago Dei, or the image of God, is a concept that is our culture is screaming for. It's a wound that the image of God would be a salve for, if we keep that in mind.
Yeah, man. How would you articulate what you think? So I love that question. I remember when you shared that, I was like, that's so good. That'll preach, guys. Yeah, whose impression is on you? Alan, you should take notes. I'm curious, when you think about like those around us who, don't submit to the authority of Jesus really in any way. And so what we would understand to be true as a theological reality is the Imago Dei, that we're all made in God's image, even those who don't put their faith and trust in him or even acknowledge him in any way. What would be helpful for the church from your standpoint as a way to articulate? How would you want to help Grace Hill understand whose impression those outside of Christ would have? I think that's such a helpful thing. Like the Pharisees are questioning, and then Jesus shows them the impression of the coin, like, well, whose impression is on here? And they kind of won't see it. He's like, okay, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to the Lord what is the Lord's. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's the impression that you would say is on most people that don't know Jesus? What would that impression look like if they were to be on a coin, so to speak? What do you think that would look like?
Well, I don't think it depends on their heart, like whether they understand their sin problem or not. That impression is there from the time they're growing in their mother's womb.
Yeah. Ecclesiastes, eternity is written on the heart of man. Right. Yeah. And
it remains until their last breath.
Yeah. Let me rephrase that, because that's totally correct. Thank you for correcting me, Mark. This is good. This is a great lesson on how to gently correct someone. Thank you, Mark. No, in all seriousness, their perception of whose image they have, because and maybe what I was thinking of more is, instead of trying to ask you the question, I was just thinking, in some ways they would see whether it's themselves as like the end. And so, man, I'm just going to go after, you do you, I'll do me. Like, what's best for me is this. And so they miss the fact that the truth is their identities in Christ. And I think the culture, like how could we help by submitting to Jesus' authority, really show them whose image they bear? Maybe that was a better way to ask that question.
Well, I certainly think it has consequences in our relationships.
Yeah.
Our friendships, our work relationships, in that if the person who I'm interfacing with has God's mark on them, is made in the image of God, then there are a whole set of consequences about how I'm going to speak to that person, how I'm going to treat them. I mean, courtesy wise, again, we're Jesus is watching and he's there in our midst,
Yep.
and we're going to make him, if that's our goal, to make him look good,
Right.
then someone who's made in his image
Right.
would be treated with, even if it's not returned,
Right.
or even if we're scorned, abused,
Yeah.
teased, or whatever it is,
Right.
that's not our problem. That's the authority of God to take care of that. But we can rest in our obligation is to treat them.
I think that's beautiful. I think there's such an apologetic for the Christian faith as it relates to the authority of Jesus by exactly those things you were saying. Of like when Peter says like don't revile, and Jesus when he was reviled didn't revile in return. And so even the way we behave and submit to the authority of Jesus in light of people who are seeking to understand the image that they are made in, the impression that God has placed on them as his image bearers, but they don't see it or aren't even looking for that. They're content looking for their image in any other shape or fashion. That there's a way that when we submit to the authority of Jesus, that is actually an evangelistic tool of going like, no, like you were made for something more. Your purpose is found in this. And anyway, I think that's really helpful.
And the hard thing with the authority is that sometimes in the military, I have to do things I don't want to do. And I'm not asked my opinion. I don't get to vote, so to speak. And in the same way, it doesn't really matter how I'm being treated.
Yeah.
My standard is unchanged. When it's someone who loves me and it's in a nice, warm, safe home with a table full of food, that's easy.
Yeah.
When it's tired, hungry, feeling alone, hearing whispers in your ear that you don't want to pay attention to.
Yeah.
That's the point where it's hard.
Yeah.
And Jesus' other analogy in the Gospels is about a seed dying.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think that's what authority has to do with. Our dreams, our desires, our expectations for the outcome. If I buy into this set of principles, might ultimately be a death. Not in a physical death, but again, in Holy Week, Jesus is about to physically, literally experience that and then upend it. And so just like, Abraham with Isaac, and so many examples where people are called to, put in quotes, to die, and then turn that over to the authority of Jesus to bring the outcome that he wants. We like to talk about the good ones,
Right.
like Joseph being in prison and then being second in, but not all of us are Joseph. Some of us are in hard places and kind of stay in hard places.
Yeah.
But the authority doesn't change.
Yeah. Guys, it's been really, really helpful. Just really appreciate in several facets. And then literally, I think we've kind of like touched almost all of life in one way, shape, or form. But even Becky, as you're referring to just in the everyday moments, I love what you even, the small moments like that, to not miss that the authority of Jesus matters in those places. And that even in the text, as we read it, as his authority is being challenged, like these small moments can challenge times for us to question the authority of God. Does it matter here? Should I trust him and do the thing that in some ways, what you even said, like that I don't want to do, or that I know I should do, or I'm feeling tired. But those are those moments for us to have those opportunities to go, God, help me. And sometimes we fail and we have to ask for forgiveness, but other times we can get those as moments to catch us, just to pay attention. Like, oh Lord, what would it look like to trust you in my frustration here or with that person? And I just think that's such a helpful place, Becky. So I appreciate that. Mark, I think one of the places that, clearly all of us in one way, whether we're at home or in the workplace, authority figures in our lives, like just such the theology of working under the Lord and to entrust ourselves, like by making our bosses look good, or the coworkers we work with, like care for them, or to trust Jesus by loving them well, or not engaging in certain things that would bring discredit to Jesus's name and who he is really helpful, because man, every one of us struggles in our work situations. It's just the fall. We're all sinners, and we're all working with sinners. And some of us are leaders and some of us are followers in our jobs. And man, to entrust ourselves to the authority of Jesus in those places. Not easy, but it is strengthening and it is faith giving when we can walk in that and encourage each other in that way. And then I love even just culturally the idea of just seeing like, man, such the questioning of where is truth? Is there truth? Like, everyone has their truth and everything's relative or what, or certainly putting down the claims of the Bible, but to trust in that as Jesus was pointing over and over again and pointing people back and having to have them make a decision. Like, am I going to trust you or am I not? And so our culture, we have the opportunity in a loving way, in a compassionate way to say, man, we want to offer you. Jesus offers a better way. But the point is will they trust him? And I think what's beautiful, Grace Hill, even as we just wrap up our time here, is as each day, as we keep moving towards this and answering the question, who is Jesus? Tonight, we worked through that he is the Lord. And the whole thing that we can trust this by, the whole source of that, the Mark and Becky and myself or you, the only way that we know that that's even legit is the fact that in a few hours later, Jesus is going to actually die like he said he would. And then he was going to be raised from the dead 3 days later, like he said he would. And so we're not putting our hope in this mere ideal or this beautiful work of literature. We're putting our faith and hope in a real person who died on the cross and rose again. And so that as we submit to his authority, he living and actively now in our lives and all around the world, we are entrusting ourselves to the living God, the Son of God, the Messiah, the Savior. And so, Grace, I just hope that as you just face the challenges and the times where we want to find a way around Jesus' authority or not trust it or it's not worth it this time or whatever the place you is, whether it's the small moments like Becky said, or in the massive moments that we find ourselves in this day and age that we live in, questioning everything, that you would find hope and strength this Monday evening or whenever you're catching this, that the life and death and resurrection of Jesus gives you hope to trust in his authority because he's alive and his spirit lives within us, and that together, even as Mark and Becky, you shared, that we get to encourage each other over and over again because it is hard. Jesus knows that, but he didn't leave us alone. And he is, I love that, he is with us. Great. So we love you. We hope that this Holy Week is just a real encouragement to your own soul. And we are excited to have another special moment on Tuesday night. So please stay tuned to that. Until then, we love you. Bye, Grace Hill.